I thought we could begin an Inksploration for green inks that lean to the olive tonality. So you can see we have here several inks, but from a light olivey green, yellow almost, and then going darker. And I have some bottles also. So if I counted correctly, we have 15 inks to represent this kind of olivey green hues and shades. And I'm going to swatch them onto my river paper. And I have my page stamped out. These are clear stamp sets, but I used one stamp from Nicole Josephine. And I'm using her brass clip, which you'll see in the next shot also. I've got some ink samples and some ink bottles. I have my PENdulum walnut modular set. So this is a magnetic set to hold your ink samples, and then a pen tray. And in my pen tray I have my Hanabi glass dip pen and a watercolor brush number 2, and I also have my singular ink vial stabilizer by Fountain Pendulum, and that'll hold each individual sample vial that I'm working at a time. So let's get started, shall we? So I'm going to try to shoot these in order of lightest to darkest. My estimation of that, of course. So it may not be perfect, but I'll do my best. And here's the Nicole Josephine brass clip I was mentioning. And I picked these stamps because I wanted a good amount of real estate to swatch. So let's start what I anticipate will be the lightest of these kind of olive green shades. This is Teranishi Guitar Emotional Olive. So in each of my swatches, I'm going to try to accomplish a light area of saturation and dark to give a best representation of the inks and their properties and capabilities, and also how they will perform differently in various fountain pens. So some of the properties would be interesting for doing art, but for me, most often it's going to be done in a fountain pen. Nagasawa Kobe. We're going to have a nice representation of Kobe inks in this lineup. That's actually coming up a lot darker than I was anticipating, but we'll see in the swatch. Maybe it just feels so much darker next to the Teranishi Emotional Olive. Oblation Paper and Press, Oblation Olive. Oblation is a really lovely shop in Portland, Oregon, and they have a line of their own fountain pen inks. I don't know who makes them. There's maybe 4 to 6 colors, and this is one of them, and it's really lovely. So this already looks lighter than the previous, so like I said, I'm trying to shoot to get them in the general direction, but I apologize that I did not do it perfectly. Robert Oster, Crocodile, green. I've really enjoyed the Robert Oster inks. They had a ink play setup at Stationery Fest, and I really got to dive in at checking out a bunch of their inks. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just swatch, you know, a couple that stand out to me. And I really got sucked in because there were so many that I did like very much. It's so interesting that when you write with these inks versus when you see them swatched, how different they are than what you're expecting. And Klingner. Alt Goldgrun. This has been a very popular ink over the last maybe couple years. And I think it's because it's a very unique green. My apologies, I just noticed I was shooting off camera. But this is a collab ink between Dominant Industries and Wonderpens, Tuna and Olives. And Tuna is the name of one of their shop cats. And this has been favorite green ink because it's such a nice balance between the light hues of green and then the higher saturation dark. So I've really enjoyed this. Sealer Ink Studio 967. This is a bit more of a vibrant green. From the look of it, it's actually not very olive. Private Reserve Avocado. There are a couple green inks that I wanted to include in this comparison because they're very nice greens, but I guess I did say leaning olive. That's not necessarily true of all of them. But nice more earthy greens in general. Nothing too vibrant, that has a nice undertone of a good earthy, big grungy green. Nagasawa, Kobe, Akashi, Museum, Gold. Now I'm going to have some more Kobe inks coming up also. This one I did get a bottle of at Stationery Fest, and it's my only bottle of Kobe. I tried to get mostly sample inks and not get too many bottles in general. And I can see, despite my efforts to get these kind of in any kind of ascending order, they are out of order. And of course, I had to get a Pelikan ink in here. Pelikan, Edelstein, Olivine. This is more of a forest green, but again, it has a very earthy undertone to it. Now we will have a succession of Nagasawa Kobe inks. This is number 15, Maiko Green. Kobe inks have been my ink of exploration this year, and they particularly have a lot of lovely greens, but a lot of lovely colors in general. This is Nagasawa Kobe, number 28. Suzuran Green. So, as I was saying with Kobe, is a lot of their colors are very beautiful, and a lot of them have a really lovely earthy undertone and complexity to them that I think adds a lot of interest, rather than some inks that can be a bit more one-dimensional and sometimes even flat. Here's actually a bit of a fan favorite, at least to me, and some of the pen friends I've had the privilege of meeting. This is number 34. Suzuran Tea Green. And this is perhaps a favorite of, not perhaps, this is definitely a favorite of the Kobe greens. And some of them are really close and it's hard to pick between them. But there's a certain richness and the green undertones that come from this one that just really get me excited. When you look back at your own notebook and see a color that you're just like, oh, that's beautiful. What was that? I'm going to use that again. You know it's a favorite. Nagasawa Kobe number 49. Kitano Olive. Our last ink is a Sailor exclusive. This is Sailor Pen Show exclusive for 2024. And I anticipated this to be the darkest, and it looks like it is. So there you have it. The 15 inks are swatched. Now I'm going to let them dry so we can take a look at the whole page, everything side by side, and select some favorites. Alright, it looks like the inks are nicely dried now. That way we can take a look at some of the shading properties and what the color looks like more for real use, whether that be for writing in fountain pens, using a dip pen, or doing art with it. So here's the overlook of all of them, and I'll zoom in and go through them each shortly. But yeah, very, very interesting. I'd say I think they all kind of belong here, more than you'd, I guess, initially think. But it's really interesting to see them swatched side by side versus individually, because I think it helps give some of the perspective and undertones that maybe you aren't as easy to detect otherwise, and look at them in some good lighting also. So let's go ahead and zoom in and take a closer look. Teranishi Guitar Emotional Olive, and this looks a lot more yellow and not nearly as dark as I was anticipating. Yeah, that's nothing like what I was expecting. Very interesting. Nagasawa Kobe Kikusui Biotope. I really, really like this color. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's such a good balance between the yellow and the green, and the shading spectacular. This is definitely a favorite for me. Oblation Olive. Again, this one leans perhaps a little more vibrantly yellow than would be ideal for me personally in the swatch, but then when you see it in the writing, I think it's fantastic. And actually, this is true too of the Teranishi Guitar Emotional Olive. In the swatch, it's very bright and yellowy, but in the writing, it's actually improved, I would say. Robert Oster Crocodile Green. It's very nice. Maybe a little bit more, you know, vibrant than what I would prefer myself. Rohrer and Klingner Goldgrun. This is not as spectacular or unique or interesting as I was expecting for the hype that this ink gets. I think it's a great ink, but I wouldn't really say... I've really enjoyed it in my fountain pens too. It's a well-behaving ink. It's a beautiful color, but if I were to pick a favorite, I'm not sure that one would make it. Dominant Industries and Wonderpens Tuna and Olives. I really love this. I think it gets bright enough that you get some interesting shading going on, and you still get that really rich, dark, kind of grungy green that I really enjoy. So I like that a lot. Sailor Ink Studio 967. This is a little more vibrant in person than it shows up in the swatch. This is more of like a richer, more vibrant, or not richer, but a more vibrant, yeah, it's rich, green. I like it, but it's more vibrant than ideal for me. Then we have Private Reserve Avocado. This has been a favorite in the past for me. I love the saturation of the ink, and the hue is great. But surprisingly, in comparison to the rest of the inks that we've swatched, this gets bumped out of the favorites spot. Nagasawa Kobe Museum Gold. I really like this, but when compared side by side to Biotope, which it's very close to, I like the Biotope better. It has better shading. It is a bit richer, more saturated, a little bit more vibrant, and I have to say I prefer that. Though when you look at the writing samples, not so much the swatch, they look surprisingly similar. And I think that's one of the things with these inks, or any ink in general, is when you see a swatch, you see more of the properties, the capabilities, the true tones of an ink that we often don't unearth when we're writing with it. Pelikan, Edelstein, and Olivine. I've always thought this to be green, and now that I see it swatched in good lighting and next to other greens, this is really more of a blue-green. Interesting color. I like it a lot more in the writing sample than in the swatch, but it doesn't really belong in this page or collection necessarily. Nagasawa Kobe Maiko Green. I'm really allowed to swatch these Kobe inks side by side because even on like my coloring swatches, I can't tell them apart. The differences are so subtle. But now seeing it on swatch side by side on the same Tomoe River, this is the Sanzen Tomoe River paper, it's really nice that I can distinguish them. So this is a lot lighter, a lot less saturated, and it does have like the slightest blue undertone to it. So again, I'd say this is one that doesn't really fall in the general color range that I'm looking to focus in. Then we have Nagasawa Kobe Suzuran Green. This one has been very difficult to compare to Sorokuen Tea Green. And let me see if I can, I'm going to put a diagonal so we can have them both in the same shot. And now seeing them side by side again in good lighting, this is what I identify as a difference. This is more of a vibrant, slightly more vibrant green, and it delivers really nice shading. Versus the Sorokuen Tea Green is a bit darker, and a bit earthier. I think they're both really gorgeous, and they're both favorites. And yet they're so subtly different enough that I wouldn't mind having both in a green ink collection. Not sure if I was to buy a bottle of one or the other, which one I would get. I think I'm kind of leaning, surprisingly, the Suzuran green, because I like that vibrancy a little bit more, but not sure. I also like the Surakuan tea green because it has the name tea in it, and you know, that for me that makes a difference. Nagasawa Kobe Kitano Olive, and glad to see this too. This is a lot more murky, and it leans a lot more of that brown, gray, earthy tone with more of like more of an even amount of green. So I'm not as much of a fan of that personally. And then finally the Sailor Pen Show exclusive 2024. This is a lot more muted or washed out than I anticipated, at least on this paper. And there is definitely a greenish hue, but it's this is a very muted, very murky, very swampy color, if there ever was one. So, and I would say that that is the darkest in the scope of appearance with all these different inks. So there we have it. And if I were to kind of create a little green collection for myself, here are the ones that I would be inclined to actually get, keep on hand, use regularly, maybe even commit to bottles. I wish more companies offered small bottles, like 10 ml bottles, 15 ml bottles, because that I would definitely do. When it comes to like these larger bottles of 30 up, that's a lot more difficult to commit to. So what I would be getting is the Nagasawa Kobe Kikusui Biotope. I love this color. It's definitely a favorite. Top favorite for this whole spread. I would also like the Oblation Olive. And I think it's a combination of, I like the color a lot, especially in the writing more than the swatch. And I really like the Oblation shop. And now that it's seeing the ink and it performs well and everything, although, have I inked it in a pen? I'm not sure. I think I have. I'd be happy to get a bottle, or get some of that, I would say. I have a bottle of the Dominant Industries Wonderpens Tuna and Olives. I would get that again. Again, I think it's because I love the color, but also because there's that connection with the shop that you love and want to support. So, and this is one again that I think I really like the look of it in writing more than the swatch itself. And I have Nagasawa Kobe Akashi Museum Gold. Like I mentioned before, if I was to pick between these two, which are very close, I would get the Biotope personally. But if you wanted a more muted, this does look more gold than green, then that is a really good option. And I do like it, and I enjoy it. And then we have the Kobe Suzuran green versus the Surakuan tea green. I would just get both. I like them enough that I would probably just get both. So those are my favorites. Let me know if you have these inks, which are your favorites, or just looking at the swatches, which really pull at your heartstrings for a nice green ink. I'll thank you so much for joining me and for watching. Feel free to participate in the comments below. And I hope you're enjoying your inks and your ink swatching, your ink exploration, and continue it. Find the inks that you love. I strongly encourage people to try ink samples, swatch inks, or swap inks with friends. It's a really great way to be able to expand the horizon of inks, find what you like, and not necessarily always commit to a bottle right away. So it's all up to you now. I'll see you on the next one.